Hello! Happy Earth Month! So today we are going to be talking about 5 environmental eco-fiction books about the environment. So the first book that I would like to discuss is The Overstory by Richard Powers. I read this last year. It was one of my favorite books of last year. It inspired me so much on my own relationship with nature. If you can't tell from the cover, it is a book about trees, about humans' relationship to nature, specifically trees, but also just the forest, anything that is found in nature. I felt so utterly transformed by this book. It's intertwined narratives of a bunch of different characters. The beginning of the book gives you the background on each of these characters in individual stories, and then further sections of the book bring them all together to have a cohesive story. If you like, intergenerational things, just massive stories, slow, quiet writing, beautiful nature writing, I highly recommend this book. I didn't by any means think it was a perfect book. I do have a pretty long review of it on my Instagram if you want to look at that. It is kind of like a pandering to white people book in some ways. Most of the characters are white. There was I think, Chinese American character and an Indian American character. And other than that, all of the characters were either white or non-specified, which is obviously just not the reality of who is actually on the forefront of environmental issues. And I also felt like the depiction of the disabled character was really, really problematic. And the female characters kind of ventured towards Manic Pixie Dream Girls to me, but it wasn't to the point that I didn't still enjoy the book. I don't want to not mention these issues, but at the same time, I do still feel like the book was really important for me to read, and I do feel like it could add value for a lot of people. So if you think you might be interested in reading it, I do highly recommend that one. The next book I actually just read, and this is Fauna by Christian Vadnais. This is a translated novel. This is a French-Canadian author, and this is it's very, very slender. It did not take me long at all to read. And this is a beautiful book. Paper is beautiful. I think it was printed on it says on an old school press or something like that. So anyway, not important, but this is a very interesting thought experiment, I would say. This town, basically after some unspecified climate crisis, how humans and nature will interact after that has reached some peak. It was very interesting. And if you like, I would say Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, if you like nature, but weird nature, creepy nature, kind of a tiny bit of body horror, not a lot, you like that sort of thing, I think that you would really enjoy reading these. But at the same time, I didn't feel like there was a lot of substance behind them. I did enjoy the experience of reading them, but I'm not sure that there's anything that will stick with me into the future. It felt, again, like a thought experiment. It didn't feel like there was any point, really. It was just what would happen if humans did have to kind of adapt and live differently and, go back to nature and just become the animals that we actually are. But, from a fantasy sci-fi perspective, it was super interesting. From a science perspective, I'm not gonna lie, there were a lot of moments where I was just that's not how evolution works. You know that's not how evolution works, right? You're just doing this for the story. But nonetheless, it was a really enjoyable read. So if that description of nature, weirdness, and evolution sounds interesting to you, then I would definitely check this out. The next book is The Disaster Tourist by Yun Ko Un. This was recommended to me by a friend on Instagram, the Bookish Sociologist, and I got it from the library and I read it in one day. I loved this book. It was a great time. So this is kind of speculative, but honestly not that speculative. Like, things like this do happen. This is about a woman from Korea who works for a tourist agency that specializes in disaster tourism, which is, you know, going to the sites of natural disasters or man-made disasters or, you know, any crisis to, you know, tourism. And she is kind of struggling at work, and she ends up getting sent on one of their disaster trips that is failing, to see if the trip is worth salvaging or not. And while there, you know, she makes some discoveries, etc. I won't give spoilers, although I think even the back of the book says more than that. But I would just say read this. I would recommend this honestly to anybody. This was amazing. Such a quick read, and it had so many good things to say. So, you know, it starts out, she's at her job and stuff, and then there was like a lot of kind of things you could read into it about capitalism and, like, you know, the burnout and the work culture and everything. And then once she's on this trip, just so much about the first section was such good commentary on, I know it's not Western, just kind of the global north, the privileged countries, their view of non-privileged countries, how tourism in general works. And the whole first section of it, all I could think about was the Instagram No White Saviors, which if you don't follow them already, you absolutely must follow them. They do such good work, and they're like spreading so much education. They also have a podcast, so definitely check that out. But that was all I could think of, like the whole beginning of it. Like this quote from the book: on a disaster trip, travelers' reactions to their surroundings usually went through the following stages: shock, to sympathy and compassion, and maybe discomfort, to gratefulness for their own lives, to a sense of responsibility and the feeling that they'd learned a lesson, and maybe an inkling of superiority for having survived. And it was just so true. This voluntourism or whatever is all about the person taking the trip. It's never about what the people in the country need. It's always about the person taking the trip and what they're benefiting from this, and how they're gonna post all these pictures and feel all, you know, sanctimonious afterwards. So anyway, this is a total diversion, but this book was great. Highly recommend it. Just 100%. You might say it's not totally about the environment, but it is, and also all of it's related. Imperialism, the West, the North, all of the things that we do, the way that we take advantage of other countries, it's all related, so I'm counting it. So the fourth book I don't have with me, and it is Tentacle by Rita Indiana. I read this on Scribd. Rita Indiana is a Dominican author, and this is translated from Spanish. It is a very complicated story. After the wide-scale release of hazardous chemicals, like I believe it was chemical weapons, the story of the world basically after that point, specifically the islands in the Caribbean. So it begins with a maid in a wealthy woman's house in Santo Domingo, I think. Then it goes into many other storylines, many other characters. I was editing this and I realized I did not summarize this book at all. Hopefully the audio is not too terrible, but so the main character is trans, and they are kind of the chosen one in a, I believe, Yoruba-inspired myth of some kind. Multiple of the characters were inspired by Yoruba. So they have to basically save the island from the, peril that it's in. There's a lot of time jumps, character jumps, and they're all interconnected, but that's not necessarily apparent until later in the book. So anyway, just wanted to actually give some description of what this book is actually about. So there's a lot of exploration of like trans identity, queerness. It does briefly touch on things like racism against Haitians in the Dominican Republic, exploitation of youth, especially LGBTQ+ youth, but it kind of very rapidly veers off of those topics and goes into a very interesting but different story where you're following a different character, and I just didn't vibe with that story nearly as much. And it was also just ridden with racist language, colorist language, misogynistic language, homophobic language. That character had a lot of really, really problematic views and just worldview in general. And I think that sometimes that's good. I think sometimes that's valuable to explore that, to address it, but it didn't really feel to me like it was addressed. It was just kind of there, and I didn't feel like there was any really commentary made on it. It was just kind of a part of his character, and it never really got resolved or discussed. And so in that way it felt kind of gratuitous to me, because it never served like a purpose in the story, if that makes sense. But I did look up reviews, and the reviews in Spanish are a lot like overwhelmingly better than the reviews in English. So I do think that there was probably some cultural commentary that was a lot more relevant that I might have just not been able to pick up on as much, because that's not the culture that I am from, and I wouldn't probably pick up on it too much. It was definitely not something that I was disappointed that I read, but I left feeling like there was untapped potential there. So I am interested in reading more from Rita Indiana, because I think that they had a really great way of introducing a lot of really important topics, but I didn't necessarily felt like they followed through with them in a way that I understood, at least. Definitely an interesting read, and I would love to know what you guys thought of it if you have read it or if you do read it. The last book, which is actually books, is one that I apparently can't go a single video without talking about, and that is Borne by Jeff Vandermeer, and also Dead Astronauts by Jeff Vandermeer. And also the short story that goes along with these books is called The Strange Bird. This is currently probably my favorite series. That's a big thing to say. But it's definitely up there, let's say. So Borne is the story of a scavenger after the collapse of society precipitated by the failure of the company, which seems to be kind of the central functioning of society in this world. And so there's just kind of bio waste everywhere. Everything is a disaster, and pretty much the only way you can get by is by scavenging. And so this is the story of really two scavengers, but primarily one who finds a creature, and it's the story of that, how it unfolds. Dead Astronauts is a kind of a companion novel to that book, and it kind of takes place before, maybe somewhat during and after. I'm not totally sure. This is a very confusing book, but this one gives a lot more context to this, but I would still say read this one first. Borne, in particular, has a lot to say about companies, industrialism, capitalism, globalization, how companies can cause tremendous amounts of harm, how we can cause tremendous amounts of harm buying things and allowing trash and waste to be distributed all throughout the world. Highly, highly recommend those books. I absolutely love them. I think that they are subtle in that they have an amazing story to tell on their own, but also really forceful, as in you don't have to look hard to find the themes there, you don't have to look hard to find the message. I think he was very forthcoming about what it is in these books, and I really, really recommend them because they are really entertaining and also have a lot to say. So that is everything for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you found something to read. If you've read any of these, please comment down below and let me know what you thought of them. I already have started several books for the next iteration of this video because, as I said, this is pretty much my favorite thing to read about. So look for another episode of this video in this month, hopefully. And I also hope to do some recommendations and reviews of nonfiction environmental books as well. So I will start getting that together as well. So subscribe if you'd like to see more, and hope to see you next time. Thanks. Okay, I thought she was washing her butt again.